Okay, perfect. So, welcome to another episode of Unbridled Medicine TV. I'm your host, Hillary Schneider, and I was just sitting up in my room today, or in my office, and I just got off a phone call with a client, and I was inspired based on the conversation, so I thought up and I'd do an episode. My hair's a mess and I look like this, but when inspiration hits, I feel like you got to go with it. So here we are. So the second episode, the topic for today is things are going to be hard sometimes. And also we need to anticipate that they are. And I want to talk about this in relationship to, both the space of starting our businesses, but also, pursuing our dreams. And this was triggered again. I had a conversation with a client of mine, and we were talking about, the process of transformation and, going for the things in our life. She's in the process of purchasing land. And that's part of what I'm helping her with in terms of adding retreats to her repertoire of what she does in that process. And we talked about how much it stretches us. And it reminded me of, I think, my own entry and naivety, when I was sort of starting out on this path of pursuing my purpose and my vision in a big way. And I think part of what happened with me is I did go through a process where I felt angry and betrayed and, this aspect of failure because things were a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And I think sometimes we have this idea that if I'm following something that is my purpose, things are going to flow really easily. And if it doesn't happen easily, it means that I'm not on the right track. And the reality of things is sometimes things are hard because we're learning something new or we're figuring something new out. And the lack of it feeling easy doesn't mean that we're on the wrong track. So I wanted to give some example of that from my own experiences because I think that can sometimes be helpful. I'll start with sort of the first sort of entry for this. In 2011, I had moved to British Columbia from Ontario, Canada. And I had this dream of always, that I wanted to live out west. And so this was me kind of pursuing that dream. And I moved out west, and then quickly, probably within 9 months, I felt like it was time for me to have my own facility and do my work with horses. So up until then, I'd sort of been dabbling on the side of facilitating my horse work. I was a nanny and a dog walker. And I always had this dream of running my own center and running my own programs with horses. And so I found myself in a place where feeling like I need to see if this is possible and if, sink or swim type of thing. And so I found the courage and I put it out there that I was looking for a facility, and I found a facility to lease just outside of Vancouver. And it was a beautiful 17.5 acre property. The whole process was very magical, which is a whole other story. And then I got there with this sort of dream, okay, I'm doing it and I'm building my dream. And I had one horse at the time, and my herd quickly grew to 5. And I had really no idea what I was doing. Of course, I didn't go to business school. I knew nothing about creating offerings or anything like that. But it was just that I had this dream of I wanted to create the center and I want to do this work with horses. And so that's what I moved forward with. And it was really, really hard. I got into debt. I got burnt out in my first couple years of doing my work. And I think I had that moment where it was sort of like, I didn't realize that it would be this hard. And there was sort of a wake-up call for me when I was sort of looking at a situation where I needed to figure it out or my horses were not going to have a home with me. And the overwhelming sense of, that place of failure where I thought it was going to be easy because I'm pursuing my purpose and I really need to figure this out. And I did. And I put a lot of work into it. And, there's going to be places where I share about, those places of how I built my success. This is not what this episode is about. And I had in 2015 a really magical year where I transformed my business. I was very successful. I made multiple 6 figures in a year, which I had not, I'd made $24,000 a year before. And then this ranch showed up that to me, my dream was always to have this property where I could have horses and a retreat center. That was always the big dream. And here I sort of found myself with the reality that this could be something that I could step into now. And I was 32 years old, and this was about 4.5 years ago. And the whole process to buying this property that I'm now on, that I'm doing this video from, was magical. It was sort of this really crazy, impossible dream that I made real. That I was sort of myself baffled that I can't believe that that even happened. Again, I'll probably do a whole episode around manifesting to talk about that journey. And I had this idea because the process to buying this property was so amazing. And it was one of those things that a lot of people were inspired by. I shared the story. I'm like, oh my God, I did this thing and I bought this ranch and I manifested the $1 million to do it. And here I am. That I really anticipated that I had got to that pinnacle where, okay, now everything is going to be easy and I'm going to create abundance from here, and it's just going to flow. And then my first year on the ranch was like the hardest year of my life. My health, because of all the stress of, I was just not prepared of, starting a new business with a retreat center, having staff, my expenses doubled. So all of the things and the foundations that I had built up to that point didn't fit this new expanded space that really stretched me in all ways. And I sunk and I felt like a failure, and my health declined. I got trampled by one of my horses and broke a collarbone. There was that year I lost a beloved horse partner a little bit tragically. And it felt like, in a lot of ways, like a really horrible, like I was a punching bag for the universe. And I remember telling my mentor at the time, like, I don't understand. I thought I would get to this place, and I had gotten to this mountain top that I had climbed, only to have it crash under me. And I didn't anticipate that it would be this hard. Or I thought that I'd gotten through the hard thing already. And it was a really deflating, discouraging place that really brought me to a really dark place internally, where I really struggled with depression and, low self-esteem, and that internal shame of, I must be such a fraud, and all these people that supported me in this dream, and I'm failing them. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I thought I knew what I was doing. And I felt really angry at the universe. I remember having this moment being like, why would you put me in this place? Only to have it be this hard. Like, I was really baffled by that. I didn't understand how it could go from such a high to such a low. And there was a real aspect where I took that blow really personally, because I wasn't anticipating that. And I had this expectation that things were going to be magical and keep being magical, and they weren't. Or my perspective of it was not. It was almost like I was, the foundation I was standing on crashed underneath me, and my own internal foundation crashed underneath me all at the same time. And I wasn't anticipating it. And there was a moment where I really felt again, I don't think I doubted myself as much as I did that year, in terms of, I'm not cut out for this. I should quit. It's not supposed to be this hard. Why is it so hard? And maybe those people were right, in terms of, this was too much for one person to try to take on. What was I thinking? Like, there was a part of me that I would wake up in cold sweats and panic attacks, being like, I'm literally insane to think that this was something that I could do. And I think it took me a long time to get to a place where I could appreciate what was happening to me, and that it wasn't sort of this reflection of that I was a failure, or that things weren't magical, or, I kind of went to this place where I prided myself as somebody that was like an amazing manifestor. Now I'm like, my manifestation powers are broken. And, there was all of that story that was going on there, because I had an attachment to how I thought it would look. And one of the things that I was talking about with my client today was, kind of the medicine of this land. And so a lot of my interpretation sometimes is, when we're going through something, is asking that question, that inquiry of, what's the medicine here? And I have come to understand that this land, not just for me, but for people that lead retreats here and different things like that, it stretches you. And the process of being stretched is deeply uncomfortable because sometimes we fight it, but it's part of the process. And I use that metaphor of, because this is one that we use a lot, of a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, and essentially its whole body has to be dissolved. And I'm sure that's not a comfortable process. And I think that one of the things that sometimes we have this attachment to, of how the journey has to look in order for us to feel or to have faith that we're moving in the right direction, or that it's what it's supposed to be. And, when I was in my first year here, it was really, really hard. And I kept trying to find an anchor, and I had to move through that place of betrayal and self-forgiveness and forgiveness and anger to appreciate that it was a deeply uncomfortable process, but it was forging something in me. I mean, in some ways, I feel very fortunate with what we're facing in our world, with the current pandemic. And I feel like my first year at the ranch actually gave me a lot of tools to be with uncertainty and when things kind of fall apart, because that actually felt in some ways a lot harder for me to go through. Not to take away, the discomfort and pain of what we're facing right now, but I have something in me that's been forged through that period. And there was also an appreciation of, I think sometimes that, and this is what I spoke about with my client, our embracing of a process is conditional based on what it looks like. And my first year, because it didn't look the way that I thought it was going to look, or it wasn't easy, or it was hard, and I had a learning curve to go through, and I didn't give myself any space or permission to have a learning curve, which I think is really, really important. One of the things that I pulled from that and what I share with people is you are going to have learning curves. And even though our, let's say, spiritual self might be further ahead, our human experience and our physical reality, there's going to be a curve of learning that we have to go through, and we need to give ourselves that room to anticipate that, which means that it's going to feel hard sometimes because it's a new process and it's a new muscle, and we're acclimatizing ourselves to that, and we feel stretched. And I think that what would have made that process easier for me, I'll say the hardest, where I made it really hard on myself, was the self-judgment, the kind of the anger, the lack of forgiveness, the shame, the guilt, and the judgment. That's what made that first year really hard, because I was sort of steeping in this pot of, I'm such a failure, and I'm so ashamed that people have looked up to me and what I've created, and I'm blowing this up on massive proportions and not succeeding in it, without giving some compassion and permission that I'm learning something new. I'm building a new branch of my business. I'm learning how to have different capacity in my world. I went from 5 horses to 13 horses, a huge amount of responsibility, learning to manage people. That's a lot of new things. And I didn't give myself permission or room to have compassion in that. So it felt really hard because of that. And I had an attachment to how I thought that journey was going to look like. And to me, I painted that with rainbows and butterflies and all of that stuff. I think here's the true reflection of this. Growth is hard, and it looks messy sometimes, and there's a disconnect that happens sometimes, and it feels like we're being stretched beyond our capacity. And it's supposed to feel like that. I think that idea that I'm going to float magically into my dream or my purpose, and it's just going to be this incredible ecstatic unfoldment. Not that there's not moments of that, but the reality is there's moments where it feels harsh and it feels hard, and we're pushed. It reminds me a little bit, I was watching a documentary last night on the Disney Channel, Disney Plus, talking about, I can't remember the name of it, but it was looking at life and nature in really harsh environments and what animals have to survive through. And even in nature, we see that reflection. Nature is this very majestic and beautiful, profound experience for a lot of us that can carry a lot of magic and possibility. And it is harsh and unrelenting and punishing at times, not just for humans, but for the animal life and for nature itself. And I think that there's an element of us being prepared that that's going to be part of that. And we have the resiliency and the strength to move through that. And I think where it was important to share is because over the years, not just in my own journey, but as I talk with clients, and one of the things that often shows up for people is that element of disappointment or failure. When they have this inspiration of, I'm going to go for it and I'm going for my dream and I'm going to build my coaching practice, or I'm going to, open up my retreat center, or I'm going to do all of these things. And then all of a sudden they come and they find that, oh my God, it's a lot harder than I thought. And what do you mean the clients aren't lining up at my door, and I'm not selling out my programs, and I feel lost when I was just really clear. And it's almost like, what do we do with that? And sometimes we don't always understand or know what to do with that. And so one of the things that I often will tell my clients in retrospect of what I've been through is, it's okay. And that's part of the process. And I even still have moments of that. I think that I've also come to realize, I also thought I would get to a certain point where I wouldn't have to face those things anymore, where I wouldn't have to face disappointment or failures or different things in my business and in the things that I'm building in my life. And one of my greatest fears, by the way, like this is one of the things that I was thinking about and journaling about the other day, is I'm afraid that the visions I have for my life will never come true, and that I'm unrealistic and fantastical about that, because that's one of the things that I've been told about myself. And I think that's a big strength of mine, because I go for things. And I've come to also appreciate that moving on the road to these fantastical visions means that I'm probably going to approach and see failure and disappointment, and those things are going to be in the mix, and it doesn't take away from the beauty of our dream. It's just part of the process. And if we kind of shift our perspective to say, this is part of it, and it's still a part of it. And, I've looked at accepting that for the rest of my life, regardless of the new vision or the dream or the purpose that I'm building, I'm going to anticipate that it's going to feel hard at times, and I'm going to be challenged, and I'm going to be stretched, and I'm going to feel like a failure. And I think that my recalibration and recovery is, here's one of the questions that I ask myself all the time. What's the invitation here? So whether it is an alignment place, or it is, I think sometimes failure, or when things feel hard, illuminates things within ourselves that can be recalibrated. Or sometimes it's just an acceptance that, sometimes things feel really hard and really harsh, and knowing that I can move through this and I'm still moving in the right direction. So when things feel hard, it doesn't mean that we're off course, or that our dreams are not coming true. It just means that there's a process in building them, and we need to embrace that process and know that that's a part of it. One of the things that I've learned from working with my horses is to have this place of neutrality and not judge the different experiences we see in life. And so as human beings, we're really easy to say, this is bad and this is good. And I look at, really what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to live my life and dance with the times where things feel hard and the times when things feel easy, and not pin them against each other or judge them and say, this is good, this is bad, this means I'm a failure, this means I'm a success. And to really drop those labels that we hold on ourselves of, this is what it's supposed to be. I know in my first year, where it was so hard, there was a lot of dismantling for me in terms of the identities that I held on to, the roles I felt like I needed to hold. Still this kind of, I would describe it as a sword that I held over my head of that, this is the height that I have to embody to have other people be approving or to be proud of me, and for me to be proud of myself. And if I don't reach those heights in my idea of that, it means that I'm a failure. And I remember having a conversation kind of midway through my hard year with my loved ones, and I was so afraid and I was in so much shame, because it's like, you put your stock in me and you backed me in this dream, and I'm failing you miserably because it's so hard and I'm not making the money that I needed, and I'm going into more debt and all of this stuff. And you know what they said to me, and this was really eye-opening to me. It's like, none of those things are things that we see about you. It's like it was the opposite. They're like, we're so inspired by the things that you do and how hard you work, and your commitment to the things that you're creating. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm so devoted to my path, even when things feel hard. And that was something that was a really great perspective for me to hold on to, that it's actually a show of devotion, that I can navigate the different waters of what I see in life. And that I know that I'm not going to just be, floating along on a river that is taking me in its current. Sometimes that river is going to be choppy. So I think where I wanted to share this and talk about this is, again, I witness this a lot in my clients and conversations we have, where that comparison of I'm a failure, things are hard, and where we make up story about ourselves in reflection to that, or we anticipate that it's not going to be that way. So when it is that way, it kind of becomes a dismantling of our dreams, or I'm not on the right track, that it's going to be hard sometimes. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. And I try to be somebody that speaks the authenticity of the journey. It's going to be hard, but you can do the hard things and you can be in the hard things. And I think the approach is that we embrace the full spectrum and range of what our journey is going to look like when we're building our dream, when we're pursuing our purpose, or you're building a business, that there's going to be one step forward, two step back sometimes, and that's normal. And everybody goes through that, and it's okay. And it's you don't have to judge yourself in that, and you can anticipate it. And it's almost like, I'm thinking about, I'm kind of preparing for having a child, hopefully in the near future. That's sort of the plan. And I'm sure I have a fantasy of what that's going to look like. And I'm positive it's going to be harder than I think. But I know that within that journey, I will find my capacity to create through. And it's going to be hard sometimes. And so I'm not going in with this naive perspective of it's going to be rainbows and magic. And because I believe in, I have connection to spirit and all of these things, I can manifest things, that it doesn't mean I'm going to have real hard moments in there. So anticipate that. Sometimes it's going to be hard, but I can do the hard things, and I can be devoted to my path through that and have compassion for myself as I journey through it, because that is part of the learning. And I'm going to embrace all aspects of the journey, not just the ones that I label as good, and to not be conditional on that. Because I think that, so both, I think the thing that I think I want to offer as I end this second episode, the path of pursuing the unbridling of your medicine, because this is what this is about. My interpretation of that is following our purpose and following our dreams. For me, that's sort of taken place in this retreat center. It's not conditional on how that path is going to look. So I don't say I'm only going to pursue this path and unbridle my gifts and my medicine in the world if it feels easy, because that doesn't matter. Because the point of it is I'm allowing myself to unbridle myself in the world, period. I also am not going to go in with this rose-colored glasses and think that if it doesn't look a certain way, I'm going to hold this idea that I'm a failure. So I'm going to walk this path knowing I'm going to find some jagged edges, and it's going to get a little dicey sometimes. But I have the strength and resiliency and the support to see through it. And this path is worthy of going through those things. And I'm going to grow and transform and find elements and strength to myself that I didn't even know existed. And we need to sometimes be tested and forged that way. And I'm going to know that the universe is going to love me through it. And I always shared, I think I shared on the last one that I did, maybe. No, I didn't share on the last episode, but I remember having this moment for my first year where I was having this meltdown. And I felt like my guides abandoned me. I believe that we have spiritual guides, and I'm like, oh my God, my guides have abandoned me. Like, I'm suffering, and I'm suffering alone, and I'm being abandoned. And I almost had this sense of like my guides looking down on me saying, we have not abandoned you, and we're not worried about you. And you don't need rescuing because you're strong and you're capable. And I'm like, oh, so I'm being empowered through that. You're not going to be abandoned through the hard times. And sometimes we have to face things that are going to feel harsh, because such is life. Life offers us a range of experiences. You are not a failure. Expect it, but also expect that your ability to move through it. So it's not like I want to be all doom and gloom of like, oh, great, I can expect that I'm going to fail. No, expect that it's going to be messy, and know that you can move through any part of the journey that you're being faced with, and embrace it. Like now I kind of have a perspective of, I have one of my horses, Indy, because I always add the horse medicine. And Indy is my wild child, filly, that was born in a wild herd. And she's adventurous and fearless, and everything's a new adventure. And sometimes the encouragement I feel from her is, what if I can look at life as, oh, great, this is a new adventure. And this new adventure might be a little bit harder than the one before, but it's an adventure and I can move through it. So it's a perspective shift. And then we can navigate the things that feel hard. The most important thing, do not judge yourself as best as you can. And know that shame and guilt and failure are outside of ourselves. They don't live within us. Those will probably be the hardest things to hold. Self-forgiveness, compassion, trust. You are strong enough to work through things, and it's a worthy journey. I didn't think I would survive my first year. And honestly, I joked and I said, if I get through this first year, it'll be a bloody miracle, because it was the hardest year of my life. But I did, and I'm grateful, because there was so many things I pulled from that year that has served me so well. And I know that there's a sense of satisfaction knowing that I did the hard things to build where I am. And that feels very fulfilling, as my dog agrees, which happens here. So that's what I want to leave you with. Okay, sorry, I just had to pause, get my dog to go because he's being loud. So what I wanted to offer is that reminder for people. It's to expect it's going to be hard, to know your capacity to move through it, and that you can anticipate a range of experience as you go through. It doesn't mean you're a failure, and that's part of it, and to embrace it. And what's the perspective that's going to help me move through the times that feel challenging, so I can come back to and be grounded in where I'm going. And I'll leave you with one more thing that was really important for me. I had a moment my first year where my mentor offered me this invitation to go out on the land and to basically stake my claim. And I really looked at it as, can I hold the devotion of my path in life and my desire to have fulfillment by sharing my gifts in the world, that I can be devoted to that no matter what I'm seeing in my life. And it almost was like a reforging of that commitment. And so I make it more about that than any of the external places of, how much money I'm making or how much success I'm seeing or whatever. And it really comes down to, this is about me being devoted to this desire that I want to have my medicine felt in the world. And I want to push myself to see the possibilities of that, and that I'm devoted to that path regardless of what life throws me. It's not conditional. So what is the devotion and the anchor that you're creating for yourself through this aspect of unbridling your medicine or your interpretation of that? That's going to be your anchor. That's what I come back to. And I know that within that journey, there's going to be different things I have to navigate. So that's what I'll leave you with. This is episode 2. And again, I share these things because here's my personal mission too. I believe in the medicine in the world, that all of us have gifts to share. I know that we have something brilliant inside of ourselves, and it's not just the impact of that, but it's our own fulfillment of that. And I want to support that journey. And I know how hard it is. I know how much courage it takes for us to step out and to acknowledge that we have gifts and to go out and share those gifts. So I'm hoping through these episodes is that gives you that inspiration and that anchor that you can keep going, and you can share your medicine, and you can also have that in your own fulfillment. So I will leave you with that. Hope to see you on the next episode. If you like these episodes, I'd love for you to follow me on YouTube, have a comment, what you like about this, what you'd like to hear more of. You can find me hillaryschneider.com, Hillary Schneider on Facebook. I also have a Facebook group, Epona Rising Women's Circle. And I look forward to sharing some more spaces with you guys soon. So we'll see you on the next episode.